So you know how notable actors sometimes do projects that nobody really knows about?
I was wondering just yesterday what Shia LaBeouf has been doing lately.
Okay, well, I was referring to actors who people enjoy watching.
Okay.
Were you aware that in 2002, there was a comedy drama with Matthew McConaughey and Gary Oldman? And I'm focusing mostly on the Gary Oldman part.
I was not.
So Gary Oldman, I like as an actor.
I do as well. He's one of my favorites.
He has a very wide variety of roles, and this movie really goes to the widest part. And there's one person out there who knows what movie I'm talking about before I say it. So it's a movie called Tiptoes. Gary Oldman is the twin brother of Matthew McConaughey, but Gary Oldman is a dwarf.
Interesting.
So clearly Gary Oldman is not actually a dwarf, so I'm sure there was some controversy there. But this was also pre-CGI stuff, so they had to use physical tricks to make him that height.
Okay, that could be interesting, that aspect.
You can watch the trailer, which I have, and I don't really know.
I didn't realize that AI was advanced enough back then to come up with movie ideas like that.
So, if I were ever at some sort of event that Gary Oldman would be speaking at and maybe have like a autograph table or something, I would take a DVD of this movie and ask him to sign it just to see his expression, to be like, oh yeah.
Well, I will seek that movie out.
Let us know in the comments other great movies that notable actors have done. So what did you check out this month? I know what you're going to check out next month.
So last month, I talked about The Invisible Man Appears. This month, I watched the follow-up, which in Japanese was called The Invisible Man and the Fly Man, but the Blu-ray that I bought calls it The Invisible Man versus the Human Fly. This is from 1957. It's not a direct sequel. The previous one was 1949, so this is 8 years later, but it's another movie inspired by The Invisible Man. In this one, there are mysterious murders being committed that it turns out are... There are a lot of things in this movie that don't make sense, but they're being committed by a guy who can shrink to the size of a fly, and then he flies around in the most ridiculous fashion because they actually show, like, a guy flying through the air, but he doesn't have wings or anything, and he's just kind of, like, in a stiff, like, legs sticking out position and just kind of, like, wafting through the air, and for some reason there's still a buzzing sound like a fly. And people even comment on it. So it looks really dumb, unintentionally, and what makes even less sense is he doesn't turn into his fly form or whatever until after he's killed somebody. So he just... Well, actually, that's not true. How does he do it then? As I'm thinking about it, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, why are you asking me? You're the one who watched the movie.
He uses some liquid to grow back to normal form, but he doesn't carry it with him, at least from what we've seen. But people do hear the buzzing before they die. But he goes into full-size form and stabs people with a knife, just in a normal, the way you would normally stab somebody with a knife. And then he shrinks into fly form and flies away. It's really weird. And it turns out he's working for some other guy who wants to kill people for some reason. I was very confused as to people's motives in this movie or what was happening, partially because it took forever for the movie to actually get going. I was really excited at first because it sounded cool, but it turned out to be a disappointment. And the Invisible Man part of it comes in where there are these scientists that are trying to figure out how to turn people invisible. The police officer who's on the case teams up with them, and one of them ends up turning himself invisible. Well, by the end of the movie, you have multiple invisible people, but they're actually the good guys, and they're trying to figure out who's behind the Flyman murders. So it's an interesting movie. I'm glad I watched it, but I wouldn't really recommend it. It's not as interesting as it sounds. It's more interesting from the concept than the execution. And I definitely liked The Invisible Man Appears more, and even that one I just thought was pretty good, but nothing special. I did really like the part where the police are, like, driving around, broadcasting warnings to everybody, and they're saying, like, this is what they're shouting out through their megaphones: "The human fly is the ultimate evil and is coming to kill you all." So they handle it in the smartest way possible. So from there, I watched another movie with an H.G. Wells connection. There's a lot of weird connections this month between the movies I watched that were not entirely intentional. I watched Time After Time from 1979. Have you seen this movie?
No.
Okay. So this was Nicholas Meyer's directorial debut. He, of course, directed Star Treks 2 and 6. You've got Malcolm McDowell, who we just saw in Star Trek Generations. You've got David Warner, who's in a ton of Star Trek stuff. Malcolm McDowell plays H.G. Wells, and it starts out back in his time, and he's talking about how he's created this time machine, and the police come in looking for Jack the Ripper, and it turns out that he is David Warner, who is one of Malcolm McDowell's friends, and David Warner uses the time machine to travel into the 70s, and for some reason ends up in San Francisco, and so H.G. Wells tracks him into the future, is going after him, and of course you have a love interest with Mary Steenburgen, apparently doing a tie-in to Back to the Future Part 3. It is a good movie that made me think of Star Trek 4 in the way that you have the same kind of fish out of water situations where you've got people from different times adjusting to the 70s or the 80s in the case of Star Trek 4. And some of the humor here did occasionally threaten to be too obvious, too broad, but thankfully it works way better than Star Trek 4. And there were a bunch of parts that actually were funny, unlike Star Trek 4. I know people like Star Trek 4, but I think it's incredibly dumb.
Yeah, people like Star Trek 4 a lot.
Yeah, it baffles me. Those are the people that like the most toys a lot. It's a really cool movie. I definitely recommend it. The music was by Miklos Rosa, who I talked about before when I talked about The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. And the music kept distracting me in this movie because sometimes it would make me think of Sinbad. It's definitely better than the music in Sinbad, but it doesn't fit this movie. It feels like it belongs in a Sinbad movie, where you have fantasy adventure and whatever, but this is a relatively realistic movie. And you'll just have David Warner and Malcolm McDowell chasing each other through the city, and you have this big fantasy music playing, and it just doesn't fit. But I would recommend this movie. It's really cool.
Okay. And just to be clear, you're not shitting on Miklos Rosa, right?
No. He'll come up again in these reviews, actually.
Yeah, we're introducing... Oh, I should have mentioned we're introducing guest spots now in our videos.
I watched Judgment at Nuremberg from 1961. This is a movie about the post-World War II Nazi trials. It's very long. It's like 3 hours. But it was very good. You've got every actor that was alive at the time in this movie, including Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, who I thought was the weakest part of the movie. I didn't necessarily think he was bad, but I don't really feel like he was right for the part. You've got Richard Widmark, you've got Judy Garland, you've got William Shatner, another Star Trek thing, you've got Maximilian Schell. I don't know if that's how you say his last name. There were a lot of good performances in this movie, and it was a very well put together movie. I was surprised at how much real footage they showed of dead people and, piles of bodies being pushed into ditches and stuff. It's very dark in a very real world way. It's very depressing, but it takes a really interesting look at the entire situation by bringing up perspectives that you wouldn't expect, or at least I wasn't expecting, doing a really good job of showing all the different sides of the whole conflict. Or not the conflict, but specifically the Holocaust. So if that sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend checking it out. And I know it's based on a play. It makes me wonder if the play, it probably has been published in book form. I would be interested to check it out. And it is a fictionalized version of things, so there are a lot of fictional characters in here. But I'm guessing it's pretty close to how these things really played out. I don't know. If anybody knows, say it in the comments, because I'd be interested to know how accurate it is. I watched Tom Thumb from 1958, the first of several George Pal movies I watched this month. So this is based on the fairy tale where, in this case, you have Russ Tamblyn playing Tom Thumb. Russ Tamblyn is an actor that I have mixed feelings about. I like him in Twin Peaks, and in this movie, his physical performances were really impressive. There are a few musical sequences, and those sequences themselves are not noteworthy, I would say, outside of his performances and the special effects, which really that's true for the entire movie. It's really only worth watching for the special effects. There's a lot of stop motion with toys coming to life or different compositing effects and stuff. And some different types of animation. You've got Gene Warren and Wah Chang working on the effects. Wah Chang worked on the original Star Trek. The effects were cool. Russ Tamblyn just gets on my nerves a little bit because there are times when he's in movies and you can tell that he feels like he's too good for the movie. And I think in particular of freaking War of the Gargantuas, which everybody that worked on that movie just talks about how he was very disrespectful the entire time that he was working on it. So that kind of pisses me off. This is basically a kid's movie, I would say, or like a family movie. Outside of that, there's no reason to watch it. It's just the effects. There's no depth to this movie. And toward the end, the humor becomes a much bigger part of it, and it gets really stupid, where a lot of it is just sound effects put over the things that are happening to try to make it funny, but it's not funny. And there are some scenes that feel like they don't belong in the movie. There are a lot of scenes that go on for too long. The whole movie feels a little too long. So I don't see it appealing to anybody in modern audiences. I would think somebody like me would probably be the most interested because of the effects. And there were some really cool effects, but I wouldn't really recommend it. There's not really anything beyond that. So the next George Pal movie I watched was The Time Machine from 1960. And this is one of my all-time favorites. Whenever we get around to doing our 100 favorite movies videos, which we have talked about, this will be very high on my list. You have William Tuttle doing some of the makeup effects in here, including the Morlocks, which are really cool, really creepy. I really like the first scene where the time traveler, who in this movie again is H.G. Wells, where he goes into the Morlock caverns. And it reminds me of the scene in Aliens where the aliens are like coming out of the walls and nobody sees them at first. It's kind of the same thing because the Morlocks are all kind of hidden in the scene. The time traveler doesn't see them, or George as they call him in this movie. In the book, he was just the time traveler. But that's one of my favorite sequences out of any movie. The music in this movie is great, by Russell Garcia, one of my favorite scores. And if I could have any one prop from any movie, I might have said this before in one of our videos at some point, but I would choose the Time Machine. It is so cool. I would sit in it while I watch my movies and get it all covered in food probably. And a big part of what makes the movie work so well is Rod Taylor's performance. He sells the action, he sells the drama, he sells the romance, he sells everything. But the action in particular, he really gives you the sense that he's fighting for his life when he's fighting the Morlocks and everything, or trying to save people or whatever. And it elevates the movie above other things that were coming out at the time where it just feels like watching movie action. This really feels like a guy that's really fighting and really getting all into it. And it's a big part of what makes the movie stand out, but the whole movie is really good. So this is one that I would highly recommend. I love this movie so much. It's also the only one that I can think of where you have creatures with glowing eyes that don't look stupid. Like the glowing eyes work in this movie. Whenever there's a monster with glowing eyes, I usually think it looks really dumb. I think of like the Toho movies, where like if a monster dies, like, and its eyes are glowing, they kind of fade out. And it's like, why were its eyes glowing in the first place? It's kind of dumb. But in here, they handle it really well. So from there, I watched another George Pal movie, one that has been requested in our comments, and I finally found it, which was The Seven Faces of Dr. Lau from 1964. Although the characters in the movie go back and forth between pronouncing it Dr. Lau and Dr. Lo. So I don't know. This is set in the Old West, where a circus comes to town, and you have this real estate mogul that's trying to drive everyone out of the town, and there's a newspaper publisher that's trying to stop him and convince people to turn against him. And this circus that comes in is run by Dr. Lau, who is played by Tony Randall. So he's playing a Chinese guy. Some people might have a problem with it. I thought he did a really good job. And he plays 8 total characters in the movie, including a cameo out of makeup in the background in one scene. But he also plays the various characters or creatures that are part of the circus. You've got the Abominable Snowman, Medusa, Merlin, the Great Serpent, which is a puppet snake, sometimes stop motion, sometimes hand puppet, that he does the voice of. You've got Apollonius, a blind fortune teller, and you have the Greek god Pan. And Dr. Lau also is in possession of the Loch Ness Monster, which starts out as just a little fish, but of course you know that it's going to grow by the end of the movie. And you again have some cool stop motion. Some of the same effects people that I've talked about before, William Tuttle, Gene Warren, Hua Chang, but here you also have Jim Danforth, who I'm a big fan of from things like Clash of the Titans and When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth and Jack the Giant Killer and a bunch of other stuff. It's a very Willy Wonka-esque scenario where the circus is described as a mirror that shows people their true selves. So you have a lot of different, very eccentric characters in the town, and when they go to the circus, you kind of get their true selves coming out, which you already know what their true selves are like. It does get surprisingly dark at times, just like Willy Wonka. Like there's the one woman that's told that she's never going to find true love or whatever, and that her life is empty and she's an empty person and whatever, and she is. In a way, it feels good to see somebody called out for being kind of a bitch, because there are a lot of shitty people in this movie. But at the same time, I don't know, it was depressing, but not in a bad way. This movie's also based on a book that I would be interested to check out. I wish more of the side characters were a bit more important or had, like, arcs, because you get their true selves revealed like that, but then nothing really happens with them. It doesn't go anywhere. So the main storyline obviously does resolve, and there's a love interest angle too with Barbara Eden, who is probably best known for playing Jeannie in I Dream of Jeannie. And all the performances are good. Tony Randall was very good. I'm not, I never watched The Odd Couple or anything outside of like some random episodes. But I thought he was really good in this movie as all the different characters. So I can see why somebody would recommend it, especially for me. This is the kind of movie that I would be looking for because you've got cool effects, you've got a bunch of weird creatures, you've got the whole... It's a very unique concept on the fantasy side of things. And I did enjoy it. But out of all the George Pal movies I've seen, The Time Machine is definitely my favorite. I watched The World, The Flesh, and the Devil from 1959.
It's either going to be a regular movie or a really weird porn movie.
Yeah, I'm surprised I had never heard of this movie before.
Because you've seen so much porn.
Exactly. You had Harry Belafonte as the main character, who I didn't even know had been in movies, but apparently he was in a decent number of movies. He plays a guy working in a mine, and he gets trapped in there, and when he comes out, it turns out that there has been a nuclear war, and everybody is dead. But my big question was, where are all the bodies? Because you never see a single body anywhere, so I wondered where all the people went. You also don't see that much destruction, but it was impressive how many scenes they kind of cleared out and had people walking around in, because part of it takes place in the middle of New York, and they do have like a bunch of trash scattered around and stuff like that. Like it looks abandoned and it looks run down, but it doesn't look like, post-nuclear war. So for a lot of the movie, he's just walking around and kind of trying to find other people, and maybe close to halfway, I would say, he finally finds another survivor who is a white woman, and the two of them, there's kind of like different types of tension between them because, first of all, they're seemingly the last two survivors. So you kind of think, well, they're probably going to form a relationship. And you can tell that things are kind of going in that direction at times. But the fact that he's black and she's white kind of brings up the old racial prejudices that they still had from before the world was destroyed. And it starts causing problems. And then eventually a third guy finally pops up, another white guy. And it becomes kind of a triangle. I thought it was pretty good for the majority of the movie. The ending is ridiculous and does not work, and apparently all the actors strongly felt the same way, and I don't know. I don't know how they could have ended it. I mean, there are different ways they could have ended it, and many of them would have been more effective than what they did. In a way, it felt like they kind of took the safe route and just had it be this, like I said, ridiculous happy ending that does not make sense for any of the characters, does not make sense for the situation, and does not work for the movie. And it's literally just like the last 60 seconds of the movie. Up until that point, it was interesting. Parts of it I thought were really good. The characters were written a little bit strangely at times, but on the whole, I thought it was pretty interesting. But that ending, I think that's the main reason why people don't talk about it, because it totally ruins everything. It doesn't come to a conclusion that works. But going back to connections, you've got Miklos Roja. Is that how you say his last name? I didn't know how to say his last name.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got him doing the music again, which again was better than Sinbad, but kept reminding me of Sinbad. There were parts of it that were almost exactly the same. You had William Tuttle doing makeup effects again. So I don't know. Would I recommend this movie? If it sounds interesting, I would say check it out, knowing that you might be disappointed by the ending. I guess that's what I would say. That's everything I watched. I read Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, which is a fantasy novella from 2023. I had never read anything by T. Kingfisher, but she's a pretty big name in the horror and fantasy genres right now. And I'm glad I checked her out because I did enjoy this. Apparently she does a lot of the same thing that I complain about a lot of modern fantasy, especially teen books doing, where they take fairy tales or old myths and kind of do like a retelling of them, but like with a twist. And that's what this is. This is Sleeping Beauty, but the princess is the monster, and the main character is this fairy that's watching over the tower that the princess is in and trying to make sure that she never wakes up. And you have this knight that comes along that is going to try to rescue the princess, and most of it is him and the fairy talking to each other, and she ends up kind of trying to help him, even though she also is trying to dissuade him at the same time. And you go from that to a lot of flashbacks to how this whole situation came about in the first place. And it worked really well. I thought the way it went back and forth was effective. So even though it is a retelling of a myth or of a fairy tale, and apparently she does a lot of those kind of things, this was a real book. This was actually well written and well put together, unlike most of the other books that can be described that way. So I will check out more stuff by her. I thought it was pretty good. And I've been playing Fallout New Vegas still. Definitely not as interested as I was in 3 and 4 still, but it has gotten more interesting. There is a bit more to the main storyline than I expected. I'm kind of in a situation right now where I don't know how many different factions that are all kind of trying to pull me in their direction, and I have to decide what I'm going to do. And I do like that setup. The problem for me still is that my own character doesn't have any personal investment in what's happening. I'm just there kind of by circumstance. Unlike 3 and 4, where you have an emotional attachment to other characters and are trying to do something based on that. So it's gotten more interesting. I don't know. I am liking it. It's not like I don't like this one. I keep talking about how much better 3 and 4 are, but I love 3 and 4. They would be in my at least like top 20 games. I don't know about top 10, maybe top 10 for maybe Fallout 3. But New Vegas, definitely not. If I had played this one first, I think I would have liked it more. But it still would not have pulled me in the same way that 3 and 4 do, where I put myself in the character that way. This one does not really have that appeal for me. And still, the environment is boring, like I said before. And that's everything I did this month. So what did you check out?
I watched Spider Baby from 1964, which you talked about a while ago. I'm not going to rehash the whole plot. I thought it went on a little bit too long. A few of the parts started to feel stagnant. What did you think about Lon Chaney Jr.'s acting?
I thought he was good. A lot of his performances around that time, I mean, he was in a lot of low-budget, crappy movies, so he's just kind of there just to be like, hey, look, we got Lon Chaney. But I thought he was good in that movie.
I agree it was also good. Did you feel like it was a little, like his character was very simplistic?
Yes, he's a little too kind of like the doting father character in a way, kind of like Professor X in the X-Men movies.
I wish he had had more backstory, or we knew more about him and his past.
Yeah, he almost kind of feels like he's there just to be the normal guy sometimes. That's just their parent figure.
I felt there was a lot of character development that was missed for him in particular because he was so entrenched in the whole situation and he wasn't neurologically decaying, you know?
Yeah, but I did think his actual performance was good.
I thought there were a few characters that were pushing way too hard, like the kid's uncle.
Yeah, it's over the top, but I found it entertaining still.
I liked when he had the date with the lawyer's assistant, and she seemed weirded out by him, and I couldn't tell if her character was wondering why he was so weird, or if the actress was wondering why he was so weird.
I could see it being both, yeah.
I expected the movie, listening to you talk about it, be more overtly comedic, and there were definitely funny parts, but mixed with the actual narrative, it was a weird juxtaposition, in a good way. Like, there are some truly disturbing moments, but the mood can just turn on a dime sometimes.
I'm glad you said in a good way, because that is part of what I like about it, is the humor is, and I say this all the time, but, it's not in your face. Sometimes it is, but it's part of the situation. It's funny by default, kind of. It's not, it doesn't have to, like, wave it in your face and be like, hey, look, I'm being Jim Carrey or something. I don't know. That's what I think of as being like, hey, look at how funny I am.
Did you know there was an actual official remake of this movie in 2023?
I did not. I'm guessing it's terrible.
Oh, man. I watched the trailer. The part that really got me, outside of just the terrible acting and lighting and cinematography and all of that, was there was one part where the lawyer drops the box and the spider crawls out of it,
Mm-hmm.
And they do that here. Oh, man, I think it was a CG tarantula. They look just terrible.
Oh, man. That would be the easiest possible thing to do practically.
And the image of the box was, a still photo. And it just, nothing lined up. It just looked so bad.
Oh, man.
I watched Forbidden Planet from 1956, and it's been years since I've seen this movie. But I still think it holds up. I was really impressed with the production design, both in form and presentation.
Yeah, I agree, but it's not personally one of my favorites. I think it's a little too slow. It kind of drags on a lot.
But I wonder how much of that was just the time period.
I think part of it is that they're trying to impress you with how big it is and how serious it is.
Plot-wise, there's an Earth ship going to check out this other planet after they lost contact with an expedition that was sent out there years before. And they find this one dude living there with his daughter, and he claims that a monster killed everyone. And he tells the rescue party to leave, but they don't. And then they start getting attacked. There's all these reveals as to what's actually going on. I thought story-wise, though, even though it dragged at times, the story itself was compelling.
I have a question, actually, because it's been a while since I've seen it. The doctor is very kind of secretive at first, and it turns out that he's the one that's kind of creating the monster, but he doesn't know it. So what is it that he's keeping secret if he doesn't know that he's the one behind everything?
Because he doesn't want the Earth people to take that knowledge back with them, because then he knows Earth people will come and try and use that technology.
Oh, okay.
And just laying out the story sounds like a straight horror thing, but it's not really presented as a straight horror thing because it's still 1950s Hollywood science fiction. So there's the love story and the super advanced special effects robot and all the gadgets.
I will say, as far as the effects, the monster itself, I like the method of animating it, but it is a little too cartoony. Well, actually, it's way too cartoony in design and animation.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, because the guy that did that, they borrowed from Disney, and just watching that animated sequence, it looks like Disney animation.
Which is very at odds with live action.
Correct, but it's animated very well.
The robot design does show up in the Fallout games.
Shows up in a lot of stuff. They kind of treated him almost as a quote-unquote actor.
Yeah, which is cool.
And they tried it again in Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
What was it in there? I saw it a long time ago.
So that movie was, in terms of visual CG stuff, pretty groundbreaking, I think.
Yeah.
So they were going to take the main character of that movie and put her in other movies.
Oh, okay. That could have been interesting.
But I think they even did maybe news interviews with the character and stuff too.
Interesting, okay.
Okay, there was one point in this month where I needed a nothing movie on in the background, and the one that won this time was King Arthur, Legend of the Sword from 2017. What a piece of shit. So it's a Guy Ritchie movie, and I guess what he, or maybe a 13-year-old boy, thought was really cool about King Arthur. Everything visually looks very bland. Arthur is played by Charlie Hunnam. Is that how you say it?
I think so. Is that the guy from Pacific Rim?
Yeah, and he has absolutely no personality in this movie. At least in Pacific Rim, there was enough other stuff going on that it wasn't as obvious. Most of the intentional jokes in this movie fall flat either because they're just bad jokes, or the person delivering them doesn't understand how human comedy works.
Human comedy as opposed to non-human comedy.
I mean, I struggled with if these people actually knew how humans acted. There are a bunch of other characters in this movie, but hell if I can tell you who they are outside of Jude Law playing Arthur's uncle, who is now in charge after Arthur's father died, and he wants to stop Arthur from discovering who he is, because then he'll be killed. So my favorite part out of this whole CGI cool fest is when Arthur is a little kid, and his dad is fighting this CGI shadow demon thing, which is actually Jude Law using magic or something. And Jude Law is like, "It's over, I'm gonna kill you now." That's my best Jude Law impression. And Arthur's dad is like, "No way, Jose," or whatever Guy Ritchie thought would be a cool thing to say. And he looks at little kid Arthur, and he says something lame, like, "Don't look," or "Run away," or something. And he has Excalibur, but he can't win against Jude Law. So he throws Excalibur up into the air, and it's very CGI. You know, it comes right towards the camera. And then he crouches down on this dock, because they're fighting on a dock. And he's on one knee, and the sword pierces through his back, and that causes his body to turn into the stone where the sword is that Arthur has to pull out when he's an adult. It was so great. I'm not sure if that's actually a story. It's been a while since I looked at that, so please let me know if that's a story, because I will personally write an apology letter to Guy Ritchie for doubting his skill and wisdom. I watched Hamlet from 1990, the one with Mel Gibson, and this is a period-appropriate adaptation. Glenn Close is Gertrude. And the movie was okay. I've seen better adaptations of Hamlet, even movie versions. One of the pluses, though, was Ennio Morricone did the music. But unfortunately, the music didn't really stand out. Didn't make me feel like I was listening to one of his scores. This one feels very much like they're acting on stage. And by stage acting, I mean everything is over-dramatized, the way they say things and body language, which kind of threw me off a little bit. Because if you're in a movie, if you're on a screen, you got the camera right up on you, you don't have to do that, so it must have been an intentional choice. I finished the first season of Dragon Ball DAIMA, and there's only one season right now anyway, and it was good. But the last 2 episodes did what I was afraid of, and stretched out the last fight for way too long. And it did not help that the main antagonist had the ability to instantly heal up. So for the first time, yeah, everyone was like, oh, damn. But then their solution to that is, well, let's just keep fighting him, and then act surprised all over again when he just heals up again.
I mean, it sounds like you're describing Dragon Ball.
But see, this whole show up until this point was not that, and that's what I liked about it. Original Dragon Ball I like a lot, up until the end, when it becomes Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, I'll never understand why the action stuff is more popular than the comedy stuff from Dragon Ball.
Man, Toriyama is such a better comedy writer than he is an action one.
Agreed.
I mean, Dr. Slump is one of my favorite manga of all time.
Me too.
It was funny, though. Toriyama died before this show came out, but he had storyboarded pretty much everything. And he was trolling from beyond the grave because in this show, he had Goku hit Super Saiyan 4, which was originally a form from Dragon Ball GT, the only series without Toriyama's involvement. So he said, get out of here. I'm going to show you how to do Super Saiyan 4. And it even looks very similar to GT. So that was kind of funny. So even though the last fight went on for too long and did the typical super bombastic, explosive finish over and over again, the epilogue of the show was much more thought out than other iterations in Dragon Ball. So that was a nice surprise. Overall, I am glad I watched this show. A good final note for Toriyama, and I'm interested to see how whatever they do next turns out, because they're not going to turn off that extremely lucrative Dragon Ball tap just because Toriyama isn't around. And seeing how last time turned out so poorly, we'll see. I watched Mr. Holmes from 2015, which was a movie where Ian McKellen is an old Sherlock Holmes, and I was initially not expecting much, considering this director had not one but 2 Twilight movies under his belt. I was hoping for a crossover, didn't get one, but the movie itself turned out to be decent. So Holmes is old, and he's losing his memory, and he spends most of the movie trying to recollect his final case that he did years ago before he retired, and he has a housekeeper and her son living there to help him out, and over time he and the kid become friends, and there are flashbacks to the last case, as well as a more recent flashback where he went to Japan to find a cure for his increasingly bad memory loss. And it was pretty good. I think the acting did more for the movie than the plot itself. And the plot didn't get super ridiculous just because it was Sherlock Holmes. Laura Linney is his housekeeper, and she did a pretty good accent, I think. I don't know. I can't really judge accents, so you can let me know if I'm totally incorrect. Laura Linney is an actor that has been in so much stuff, and I looked at the list. I'm surprised I haven't seen more of it. What do you think about her?
I think she's okay. I don't know. I guess I've never seen a movie that she was in and said, like, wow, she was really terrible. But I've also never seen a movie she was in and said, wow, she was really great.
The thing that sticks out for me the most is The Truman Show.
Okay, I've never seen that.
You, the biggest Jim Carrey fan?
Yeah, I'll get to it.
We need more scandals with Laura Linney. So she needs to jump out a window of a skyscraper or something while she's on fire and holding an endangered monkey. I watched The Man Who Would Be King from 1975. This is Sean Connery and Michael Caine. This was a surprisingly nice treat that I just happened to watch by chance. I'm not even sure why I decided to watch this movie. So both of them are ex-soldiers who are now con men, thieves, and just looking for quick ways to get rich. And they're both really good at it. So they decide that they're going to go to a rarely visited Asian country and essentially take over. So it's an adventure movie, and their chemistry is really good together. Sean Connery is in acting mode, which is nice, because there are certainly movies where he's only in paycheck mode. I like this movie a lot. I'm not a huge Sean Connery fan either. I do like Michael Caine.
You are making it sound interesting. And I forgot that Michael Caine was in Death Trap, and I did like him in that. So I'm more familiar with him in his newer movies where he always plays the same character. So,
I mean, you're not thinking of older Michael Caine, like Italian Job, stuff like that.
yeah, I haven't seen that.
I watched the first and second seasons of Avatar, The Last Airbender, which aired originally in 2005. I've never seen any of the show before. I'm only familiar with it via pop culture. But the cartoon always has a very high reputation. And I guess maybe I thought it was a really long show, and that's why I hadn't watched it before. But it's only 3 seasons, and each one's only around 20 episodes, and each episode is less than a half hour. So I jumped into it. And I'm not going to go into the whole plot because this was 2005, and there are a lot of people who already know. And there's, the live-action remake on Netflix. There's the brilliant M. Night Shyamalan movie. There's a whole comic series that continues the cartoon, I think. But I thought the show was good. I will say I didn't really feel that way until I got a few episodes into season 2. Watching season 1, I could see why people would enjoy it, but it felt more by the numbers. Season 2 really took things up a notch in every aspect, most notably the writing. Season 1 had a running narrative throughout, but each episode was very much its own story, and things were very isolated. All conflicts and plots were wrapped up nice and neat in less than 30 minutes. Season 2 finished every episode feeling like the end of a chapter in a book, which is actually how they define the series. They don't call them seasons, they call them books, and each episode is a chapter. And Season 2 actually felt like that. Characters get a lot more depth and growth in Season 2. Struggles continue through the whole season, with new aspects introduced to make the characters feel like real people. Their motivations, the way they interact with other characters changes based on what happens. There's strong continuity, there's good callbacks, and Season 2 is when it stopped feeling like a standard cartoon. It's still definitely a kid's show, but it's a good one. It was also refreshing that Season 2 felt comfortable putting in more lighthearted moments, but avoided feeling stupid. Season 1 took itself very seriously. And one of the biggest pluses for the show is that while it's a cartoon, it's not dumbed down just because it's made for kids. And I always like that. But I'll tell you, there's this one guy in Season 1, and he was doing this whole monologue, and it was driving me crazy because I knew the guy's voice, the way, his inflections and the way he was talking. And it wasn't a voice actor where you could immediately call the person out, like, oh, that's Steve Bloom, or oh, that's Tress MacNeille. And watching the credits, the name still didn't stand out to me. So I had to Google the guy, and it was straight up the voice of the alien from The Dig, which is that semi-obscure LucasArts point-and-click PC game that I regularly bring up on this channel.
He and his firebending army harnessed its incredible power. So only the most persistent, the most clever, and therefore the most dangerous of visitors would find me.
And this show always has a huge reputation of being a complete game changer and one of the best animated shows of all time. And I think it's a good show, especially after the first season, but I would not put it on my personal list of best animated shows of all time. Not even close. I wonder how much of it was because of what it did for shows after it. Because it's hard to see sometimes once you're so far removed from a time period. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It might have just had more of an impact at the time.
I watched Parasite from 2019, which I assume you've seen.
Yeah.
I have not. And it was great. I thought it was great. Did you think it was great?
I thought it was okay.
Oh, I thought it was really good. To keep it simple, a poor Korean family cons their way into the lives of a rich Korean family, and things get messy. That's a one-sentence synopsis of a great movie. And like Memories of Murder, which I talked about a little bit ago, this is not a movie I would generally gravitate towards watching. But I did it because of the director, and I think he's one of the directors who just knows how to make a good movie. And I still haven't seen all of his stuff, but what I have seen, I've enjoyed. And like most of his writing, there's a lot of very intentional decisions. His movies are those that I really enjoy reading up on and listening to the commentaries to get the stuff that I either missed or just wouldn't know. And that's not true for all movies. Definitely true for King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. Also from 2019, I read Doomsday Clock.
Oh, the comic.
Yeah. This is when DC decided to merge the Watchmen universe into the standard DC universe.
What a good idea.
I know you talked about this before, but have you actually read it?
I think I read the whole thing. The fact that I can't remember probably says something. And that whole merging angle was a major part I would even say the main selling point behind the whole rebirth thing.
Yeah.
Which was the next reboot after New 52.
Right. This was kind of the end of New 52, in a way.
It was kind of retconning New 52 and going back to the previous version, because nobody liked New 52, because it sucked.
And, you know, DC and Marvel, every few years, throw in a relaunch, reboot, whatever you want to call it. And I guess they said to make this one have more of an impact, that's why we're going to include Watchmen in it, instead of, you know, every other time where it's the same characters doing the same kind of stuff. So this takes place after Watchmen. So Rorschach is dead, and eventually his findings picked up enough coverage to place Ozymandias in disgrace. And I might be getting some of this wrong, because it was pretty earlier in the month, and I'm pretty sure his plan was, because he was unable to, quote-unquote, save the world, he wanted to travel to a different world to try and prevent that one from going down the same path? Maybe? Does that sound right?
I don't remember.
Yeah, see, this stuck in my brain so much too, and I read it this month. So he takes the new Rorschach and two villains into the DC universe to find Dr. Manhattan, because he suspects that's where John ended up. And it also turns out that that's where the comedian ended up after he got thrown out the window in Watchmen. Do you remember that part?
No, I don't remember that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Okay. Oh, man.
So in the DC universe, there's this movement against superheroes because it is perceived that the government is actually creating these superpowered beings for world dominance. And it turns out that in some cases, that's actually true. So Veidt relates that to the crisis in Watchmen, back on his world of world powers fighting against each other. And because Manhattan is all-powerful and can jump through all times at all times, he keeps altering things in the past to see how they play out in the future. And eventually, DC heroes figure out that he's the cause of pretty much everything going on, so they go to confront him. But because he's Dr. Manhattan, they can't do anything. And he realizes that Superman is the center of all universes. He's the linchpin in everything. And it turns out that I think Manhattan created the New 52 continuity himself. That's why it exists. Is that right? That sounds right.
Maybe.
Because his alterations created this universe. But it turns out that either Veidt, Luthor, or both of them have really been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Because Luthor discovered Manhattan was there and was changing things before anyone else did. But Manhattan realizes that everything that's been happening is bad or something, and he sees Superman protect somebody, which, Superman's only been doing for 100 years. But that revelation to Manhattan, he's like, it is good. I guess it changes his whole universe outlook. So he then says, okay, and recreates all continuities that existed pre-New 52, but New 52 still exists now as its own continuity, its own universe. And at the end, there's also stuff laid out that shows that the crossover will continue in the future, but I don't know if that ever actually happened.
Yeah, I was going to say, when this started, when that maxi series or whatever you want to call it started, it was intended to be part of the new ongoing continuity, but there were so many delays between issues once it got past like the halfway point, and DC started, deciding to do other things, that I don't know if it ended up being part of the continuity or not.
Because John gives his power to a kid and throws that kid into the DC universe as all the Watchmen stuff goes back to the Watchmen universe. But I don't know if that kid ever showed up in anything after.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because he would have the powers of Dr. Manhattan. And I did some reading afterwards, and Doomsday Clock was supposed to eventually lead up to what DC called 5G.
Yeah, I know they abandoned that.
Which was going to be the latest relaunching of all continuities. So even though this 12-issue series had just created a new continuity, they were already teasing the next one. And it didn't actually happen. And I read up a little bit on 5G, and honestly, most of it sounds really stupid. So, yeah, I read Doomsday Clock, and like you, there's a big question mark that just exists.
I thought the art was good.
I did too, yeah.
Like, both from a rendering perspective and from a storytelling perspective.
I agree. And to satisfy your curiosity, at the end, when everything Watchmen goes back to the Watchmen universe, that includes the comedian. So then he pops out right back outside the window and falls.
Okay, I do like that at least. That's good.
Yeah, because there's a whole thing. The two villains that Veidt brought with them were the Mime and the Marionette.
Okay, I do remember them.
And of course, they have a whole thing where they go to find the Joker.
So wait, why did the comedian get pulled in then? Did Dr. Manhattan do that on purpose?
Yeah, I don't remember why though. And he pops up in some DC Villains meeting and just opens fire, which was pretty goofy.
Oh, I do remember that, yeah.
I read a novel called Ice by Anna Kavan. I'll put up a picture. From 1967, which is a story about this unnamed guy and his quest to find this unnamed girl, but he's impeded mainly by ice caused by a nuclear event that's slowly encroaching across the entire planet. And it's not just the physical ice itself that's causing problems, but the world has to react to this ice taking over the world. You know, the population, governments, economies, everything's kind of in turmoil. So this guy is going all across the world trying to find this girl, and it was really interesting for a good clip. A snag in his plans is that he's on a lot of drugs, which causes him to see and experience things that might not actually be happening or real. And as the novel goes on, his reliability as a narrator completely disintegrates. And once I was in the last third, I struggled to stay interested because you knew that things might not actually be happening at all. But that reveal, that unraveling, happened too early. Things always work out for him to get to the next plot point very conveniently and without any explanation. I think so many times he's like, luckily I managed to whatever somehow. Like he even addresses how it shouldn't have happened, but it did. So he's hallucinating, insane, tripping, dreaming, or a combination of all of those things for the entire book. And even the girl he's after, he sees her in a lot of different places. And I don't mean someone reminds him of her. He actually sees her in these places. And sometimes she's dead, and sometimes she's not. And his motivation to find her isn't really clear. It's a very dedicated obsession. And while he claims it's to save her, in some of his hallucinations, he takes pleasure in the scenarios where she is getting hurt or she's dying. But he takes a jealous stance because it should be him doing that. Only he should be allowed to hurt her like that. So he really just wants to possess her more than save her. And when he does actually find her, quote unquote, and he manages to whisk her away, she hates him and doesn't want anything to do with him. So then he says, okay, then I'm going to leave. And then she's resentful. And then eventually he has to go get her again. It's like his mind can't decide which direction to go in, which again is part of the drugs and intentional. And while the unraveling reality was interesting at first, it regressed too rapidly for how long the book was. And again, if it had happened more gradually or the book was just shorter, I would have been okay with either of those. And the author herself had a drug problem, and that's widely considered to be a part of the structure and symbolism of the novel, which I can totally see. It wasn't a really long read, and it was interesting, but I don't know if I'd recommend it. Maybe if you were doing drugs yourself and then read it. But then would you have read it at all? I continued playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I unlocked everything and completed all cups on all difficulties and all time trials, and it was a good time. I also played Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3.
Oh, that's not confusing at all. Okay.
I know, it's Kingdom Hearts level title there. So there's that period where Nintendo was putting out classic 2D Mario platformers from the NES and SNES on Game Boy Advance, hence Super Mario Advance. And in my opinion, the only one that has aged really well is this one. In this era, you could tell that Nintendo was super excited that they could pack in so much content in a handheld console and add all this extra shit like vocal sound samples because it's ear-gratingly annoying until they tone that shit down in this game. And in those earlier ones, there's a bunch of additional mechanics and whatnot, but sometimes they take over the original game. They feel very out of place. The core gameplay is altered so much that it feels like a completely separate game. And the worst one, which turns a masterpiece of a game into a f***ing travesty, is Yoshi's Island on the Game Boy Advance. God. But when they got to this game, they had polished things enough to make it really enjoyable. I was really surprised at how good it was. The real bonus to this version, though, was they include the e-reader levels. Are you familiar with what the e-reader is?
No.
Okay. So, Game Boy Advance, GameCube era, Nintendo was very much into experimental hardware. And the e-reader was this behemoth of a card scanner that plugged into the cartridge slot of the Game Boy Advance. It was almost as big as the console itself. And you would get these cards with codes on them that you would swipe through, and then it would put content on your Game Boy Advance. So there were some NES game ports. I know a bunch of Pokemon cards were compatible with it, and there were some completely original games, and what we would now call, add-on or DLC content. And one of those games was Super Mario Advance 4: Super Mario Bros. 3. So they had these e-reader card packs that you could buy that contained specialty levels. And what made them really unique was not that they were just new levels, but they included content from Super Mario Bros. 1, 2/USA, 3, World, and even some Yoshi's Island stuff. So Nintendo took all the work they had done on the other Super Mario Advance games and threw a bunch of that in here. The levels are really cleverly designed, and it is essentially Super Mario Maker, but over 10 years before Super Mario Maker happened. And I played this on the Nintendo Switch Online, and all the e-reader levels are included, which is awesome, because in the States, we only got a few originally, and Europe never got any of them. So now you can play all of them, and they were really well designed. I'm really glad I got to check them out. And I've also been playing a lot of Monster Hunter Wilds, which came out this year. I'm a big Monster Hunter fan. The last one I played was Rise, which was, I'm not sure how many years ago. So I ponied up, now PS5 games are $70. And I do not play online, because in order to play online, you need a PlayStation Plus account, which for 1 month I think is $10, so you can buy a year for like $100 or something ridiculous. And I was like, yo, you already got $70 for me just to play the game. I'm just going to play the game. And I'm actually fine with it, because Monster Hunter is a team effort game. You got a team of 4 hunters that go out to hunt these monsters. And if you're not playing online, you can just have 3 computer player hunters join you, which has actually worked out fine, because I just need distractions. I need the monster to be focused on other people. If they're helpful, that's great. But if they're not, at least they're there. And I'm actually really deep into the narrative of this game. Monster Hunter games are not typically known for their deep storytelling, but this one kind of tried to do that, which really put me off at the beginning because it was so slow. But after I got through, I don't know, like the 3rd chapter, that's when the game opened up. And it was like, this is a Monster Hunter game. And I was like, I'm glad I went through, because I was finding points where I was like, maybe I should just not do this. And it's like even the developers knew that. Like they wanted to get to a real Monster Hunter game, because the first 3 chapters have all these big cinematic cutscenes. It feels like more watching a movie than playing a game. But then after that point, they get rid of all of those. And any story that needs to go forward is just character models standing in a circle talking, and you can just smash X once you've read what they're saying. And it's like, good, just let me hunt the big monsters, because that's why I'm playing the game. So I am enjoying it quite a bit. Is it worth $70? No. And I was also appalled to see how much cosmetic DLC is available and how expensive it is. I mean, I'm not buying any of that shit. So yeah, if you want to play Monster Hunter Wilds with me online, you can't, because I ain't paying for that shit. And that's everything I did this month.
$70. I mean, I heard about Grand Theft Auto 6 or whatever going to be $100 supposedly.
Yeah, I read something, I don't know how true it is, that some executive somewhere said, if we do this, it will make other companies feel comfortable raising the price of their games too, and that can save our industry.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was their perspective in a way.
And I couldn't put up enough middle fingers to that statement.
I mean, you regularly still at least buy new games, right?
That is true.
I don't think I've ever paid more than $20 for a video game in my life.
That's impressive.
I mean, and I have some that are, like, that go for a lot now, but I'm just lucky that I got them back then.
Well, that's a whole gamble, too, and there's this whole community of people who try to predict the market, essentially.
Yeah. Which I'm glad I don't care about a lot of stuff that's coming out now, because I'd be out a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, with the state of things too, and just money in general, I'm much more selective.
Mm-hmm.
Buying this Monster Hunter Wilds was a big decision. It was either that or food. So every time my hunter is grilling a well-done steak, my stomach is growling.
We have a Patreon, by the way. We could use some of that dough.
So thanks for watching, whether you're paying for it or just a freeloader.